No brakes! Here we meet again, sorry vegans, but this time to discuss another electric assist mountain bike. Though I guess it is more vegan inclusive since it's not meat powered like the Optic and Sight, but trivialities aside, let's talk. Back at the beginning of summer, Norco reached out to me to see if I'd like to borrow their new Fluid VLT e-bike. I jumped at this opportunity to ride a loaner e-bike for a couple of reasons. First up, Norco is using a new-to-me motor, the Bosch Performance SX. As is typical with mountain bikers on the internet, as soon as I ride and complain about a product, I get oogles of comments saying everything would be perfect if only I were there to ride the same motor that's on their own personal bike. Apparently, this motor is somehow prevalent, and it was heavily pumped in the comments. Next up, the fact that Norco, who makes some of the most obese EMTBs out there, has also entered the lightweight category, meant I should really give this new bike a proper try. The Fluid VLT will be relevant in this category for a while, and Norco has so much experience they will likely delete together a great vision. Or at the very least, Picasso something together that is truly unique. Gotta have it AMA BMX sanctioned. I wonder if this is safe. You should come hit this real quick and find out if it's safe. That's probably enough right there. Woo! Oh, that is tight. I want to give a big thanks to my friends over at Endura who sponsored this video, made it happen. Thank you very much, Endura. I'm really excited about this new short model that just came out from Endura. It's called the Humvee Short with Liner. I actually don't use it with the liner. I used to use my own boxer briefs underneath it. But these shorts are sweet. These are the most bomber, most comfortable, most well-engineered shorts that I've ever personally experienced. Let's do a quick little short tour. So first up, integrated belt. Comes with the short, very simple, very easy to use. Not only that, big old burly belt loops, and you could use your own belt should you have a personal preference. Sometimes we do. In back, there's this really stretchy material, so when you have the pants cinched down, but then you gotta climb up a hill and then you stand up, they stay in place. They don't sag down or anything. Next up, the amount of pockets they have is spot on. So in front, you got two zippered side pockets, one for your phone, one for your Tic Tacs and chapstick. Then in back, you can put your wallet, your passport, whatever. And then you got a Velcro pocket for your bear spray or something you got to get to quickly, GPS, maybe Smarties, whatever it may be. And then in front, there's some really cool stuff going on. You get a bonus vent with a big old zipper. I use those quite often. I'll run a link in the description below over to all the Endura stuff at Jensen USA. Anything you purchase from that link, whether it's Endura Humvee shorts, or it's some chain lube, or a pair of socks, or a whole mountain bike, whatever it is, those purchases will help support my channel, and that's a big part of how we make the whole thing come together here. Big thanks to Endura, big thanks to all of you who've tried Endura stuff, and let me know how you like it down in the comments below. All right, let's get back to some e-bike talk. I feel that the heavier EMTBs are going to fall somewhat out of favor in a few more years, and that SL is the way forward. Giving this bike some time would help me become more of a spicy sage with all this, or at the very least, a salty old dog struggling to learn these new lightweight tricks. Finally, the Fluid appears to be built somewhat more bomber than other SL offerings, which is indeed more innovative for this category. Despite riders asking for SL EMTBs with more travel and more aggressive geometry, manufacturers are still lagging a bit in this category, and it's good to try an SL that is truly ready to get rowdy in the bike park. Props to Norco for what they've done here. They're definitely at the forefront of SL development. Oh God, this is a very real hill. Focus, buddy, focus. Okay. Sizing. The Fluid has awesome geometry and sizing, at least as long as you don't make like pasta water and fall through the holes. I'm 5 foot 8 inches tall, or 174 centimeters, and I rode an S3. Norco offers 5 sizes of the Fluid from 1 through 5. The reach grows by 25 millimeters from size to size, so there are good options. However, S1 is really tiny at only a 422 reach. S5 is a proper XXL at 522. My S3 had a reach of 472, which is slightly longer than I tend to prefer.
Case.
However, the 447 of the S2, especially with that steeper seat tube angle, would be just too short for me. So perhaps with this one, I'm the proverbial linguini water, though I've dragged enough linguini along to still enjoy myself. Stack height is spot on at about 10 mils higher than a lot of the other bikes, where I had to stilt them up by adding taller bars. The stack also increases substantially from size to size. The seat tube angles get steeper here through the sizing, and the bottom bracket height is nice, it's not too low. Chainstay length grows just enough to show 4 millimeters more per size. From looking at the size chart, it appears Norco is nudging riders to select a slightly bigger bike, perhaps anticipating more of a send-it-bra usage than a dainty-daisy approach. It's kind of scary. Like, you gotta go not just a long ways, you gotta go up 5 feet and over to the side a lot. It's fast.
Not gonna happen.
The details. The Fluid VLT is running a 150mm 29-inch fork and in back 140mm of travel with a 27.5 rear wheel. The fork is a Fox 36 Grip 2 and the shock is a Fox Float X2. It's good to see heavier duty damping on this bike as it's still a little bit big boned. We'll need all the help we can get to settle Bertha down gently on terra firma, or control Bertha as she bangs and ricochets off the rubble. I guess we are here to judge her, but I gotta say, I do respect her bones. The bike came with the SRAM build kit using an AXS XO transmission drivetrain and a set of code Silver Stealth brakes. The stock tires are lightweight Continental offerings that I immediately removed and replaced with much more beefy WTB Tough casing tires. I opted for a Vigilante front and a Trail Boss rear. Props to Norco for using the carbon Praxis cranks. I've added those to the Shuttle SL and they do work wonderfully well. I rode the bike in the nearly stock configuration for most of the action cam footage you're going to see here. The brakes were fine, and while the bike shifted well, there was horrendous skipping in several of the gears on the cassette. Neither Shimano nor SRAM will always have every single item they make working absolutely perfect, and I suspect it was a dud cassette. Anyhow, as I'm a Shimano-sponsored athlete and I'm much more used to Shimano bits, I swapped the bike over to Shimano XT brakes and a drivetrain. I didn't have a microspline free hub on hand for the Crank Bros wheels, so I also had to swap wheels. The bike still rides similar, but I now feel a bit more connected to both the brakes and the shifts. The mechanical cable routing isn't bad, but it does require removal of the motor. Same with seat post routing. So I'm trying to set up the Fluid as a mechanically shifted bike. I had to pull the motor to make that happen. Getting the mechanical shifting in here, I haven't put the motor back in all the way yet. In order to look at the cables, I took the fork out to see in there, and I could almost kind of sort of see. But then I removed this guy, and you actually got pretty good visibility into where the cables are, and I was able to guide the shift housing through. So it's about an hour to get this all going for the first time. After you've done it once or twice, you could probably do it in 20 minutes, but it doesn't count putting it all back together and however many Torx head bolts you drop on the ground. This wasn't too hard, but it's more involved than some meat-powered bikes. However, when I got the motor out, I could see the positioning of the battery, and it confirmed some of my suspicions. More on that later. The ride. My first few rides were up in Whistler, either in the valley or at the world-famous bike park. The Fluid handled all of this, and in general, it felt exactly like the type of cutlery needed to devour a day in such terrain. In the bike park, it felt pretty good. I was impressed that a bike with such short travel could be so big on park fun. The Fluid was stable with the lengthy wheelbase, and with the shorter rear end, it could boost decent. At least decently enough to impress our 7-year-olds. The middle-of-the-road 64.5-degree head angle felt great on the mellow berms prevalent on kid-friendly blue trails, and would only be nervous when on the steepest valley trails. The short travel is progressive enough for most trail riding needs, and that's likely what the bike was built for. I'll tip my hat to Norco there. But when you do start sending Crank It Up and Blue Velvet, do get ready for some bottom outs. That stock progression was good enough that big efforts to pump the bike were rewarded with nice bonus servings of speed. Another volume reducer should help folks that want a grasshopper more than millipede, but it's pretty well done. Probably not relevant to anyone, but the small rear wheel was kind of crappy at wheelies through braking bumps. However, with the giant front center, the bike did okay on bike park turns, especially when you irresponsibly shrub your way through with low-high lines. Comment below if you spend most of your bike park time trying to wheelie over everything in sight. When pounding through the rough, the Horse Link rear suspension has fine small bump sensitivity, but it's not quite as forgiving through the chop as the Dual Link, VPP, and DW. Not a big deal at all, but for some reason, folks chat that stuff up online a ton. Having gone with a slightly bigger size, wheelbase would make up for some of the suspension, and I'm not going to whine about holding speed. The biggest complaint I have about the ride of the Fluid is really the weight distribution. The battery is placed quite forward in the down tube, putting more weight on the front end than really necessary. It's also a little bit higher up on the bike. The Norco does a lot of things really well, but I have to wonder, how much better could it be if the battery was closer to the cranks and further from the head tube? While we're here, let's start in on comparisons. Bikes like the Pivot Shuttle SL and Orbea Rise LT feel like the weight distribution is somewhat more centralized, which is part of the secret sauce that makes an SL e-bike just so delicious. If obese mountain bikes pound donuts by the handful, the SLs take moderate portions of trail mix. Plenty of fat, but at least it feels a little bit more healthy. I would adapt just fine to the Norco after a couple of rides. When I switched back to the Shuttle SL, it was pretty apparent that things were laid out differently. If I had to describe it, I'd say the Shuttle SL feels like riding a motorized mountain bike, whereas the Fluid VLT feels like riding a small e-bike. The balance when airborne or dancing through the rough is a little bit more intuitive on the competing bikes. There are fewer miraculous hands of omniscient beings guiding one wheel faster back to the earth on those rigs, but I want to be fully transparent. The Norco is not bad. After a few rides, it feels absolutely fine. The difference just comes out if you're trading bikes often. My upgraded Shuttle SL and the latest Orbea Rise LT feel similar to each other, whereas the first generation Rise is a closer experience to this Fluid VLT. However, the geometry of the Fluid is much improved over that first gen Rise, and overall frame stiffness is also better on the Norco. Clearly, the Norco is intended for harder chargers, something I tried to thank Norco for in my intro. The new Rise LT absolutely blew me away when I spent 2 days feverishly riding it absolutely nonstop. The entire experience on that Orbea feels a bit more refined. Orbea has more range, and the bike was not only lighter, but it felt lighter on the trail. The Rise LT felt appropriately spec'd with the Trail Spec 36 GripX and FloatX suspension, whereas the heavier duty dampers on the Norco feel spot on for it. I will say that I would feel guilty smashing the Rise at Whistler, but the Fluid, well, that all seemed totally appropriate, and that's likely due to the stiffer frame of the Norco. I do wish Norco would have bumped a little more travel into the Fluid chassis. A 160 fork would fit this use case perfectly, and more rear travel would only help. E-bike things. SL EMTBs aren't about sitting back and drinking a beer on the climb. The rider needs to be actively pedaling and just trust the process that they are climbing twice as fast as normal. I actually detuned the Bosch Performance SX motor. I found the blue and purple modes, which are the two mid-power modes, to provide more assistance than I really needed, and as a result, they drained the battery much quicker than I'd like. The Bosch app was easy enough to use, and this was a simple change. Once I relaxed that motor support, I found I could trust the bike for rides with over 4,000 feet of climbing. I could do these rides in about half the time than I would on a meat-powered rig. I probably should buy a range extender, but since this Norco is a loaner bike, I haven't looked into it. There's a sweet, pretty long jump right here that I first saw in the movie Aquatic River Rats. It's like there was 2 trees here that fell over, and then off the side of the roots, you get a takeoff. Then you get a landing right where Logan's standing. And yeah, it's solid, like 18 feet long. I don't think I've ever jumped this thing before, but on the Norco Fluid, I felt confident enough to go for it. The bike's pretty light, and one of the reasons why I like jumping a lighter e-bike is because when you're landing, it's a lot softer and easier to control than a bike that's 10 pounds heavier. So I was landing over there. I bottomed out every time, but it was always a pretty controlled bottom out. So turning up that high-speed compression definitely helps. Yeah, feels good to tick this one off the list, and I think that was the right bike for it. So kudos to Norco, and thanks to these trees for deciding to fall over. I will say that when we are out with the Shuttle SL and the Fluid VLT, the battery on the Shuttle almost always outlasts the Fluid. It's not a massive difference, and I could live with either. The Bosch system requires an extremely rapid cadence of over 100 revolutions per minute to dole out its highest power. I'm only 175 pounds, or 79 kilos, and generally use the turbo modes only to attempt the stupidest, steepest, dumbest climbs. Maintaining rear wheel traction is hard at the steep seat angle, so I rarely even get a chance to use the turbo. This is a common problem with modern e-mountain bikes. Conclusion. Norco is absolutely on the right track with the Fluid. Within the scope of other e-mountain bikes, pricing is reasonable on these, and the bones of the bike are great. Clearly, Norco is paying attention to what we all want to do with these bikes, and the real-world application of this rig is spot on. Do you have 2 hours after work to get in a quick ride? The Fluid is an excellent choice for most mountain bike trails and is plenty aggressive to satisfy the senders. Yet, it's also neutral enough that it won't necessitate youthful recklessness just to have a good time. And if you'd like to shred for 3 hours, well, a range extender is indeed available. Big thanks to Norco for the loaner bike.